Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the Riptide. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy. Hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. I'm Jamil Zainasheff, and you're listening to Brew Strong. With me today is my dear friend and award-winning home brewer, awesome traveling companion, Travis Combel, out in Houston, Texas.
Thanks for having me, Jamil. Happy to be here.
How you doing today, brother?
Doing all right. The weather is it's nice weather right now, believe it or not, which is rare around these parts.
It's nice weather here too, which is really odd because it's been just pouring rain nonstop.
I heard about that.
Got like 60 feet of snow in the Sierra.
Do you get snow every year? Like any snow?
Up in the mountains we do.
Sure.
This year, there was a point where the Weather Service, like 2 weeks ahead of time, said everyone in California will be able to see snow no matter where they're at. Which is like, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
They were right.
Wow.
There was snow on every little hill anywhere. It was pretty fascinating. I'd not seen that kind of snow before. I'd seen snow, a couple of times in the lowlands, in the flatlands, but yeah.
Snow's always pretty at first. Yeah, then it kind of goes south.
Yeah, and then you get tired of it.
There's that. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, let's see. I'm just got all the technology here. I'm an old man, so I got to use the Facebook. I've got to use the Zoom. I've got to use the internet, the interwebs. It's difficult.
You got it all lined up. It seems to be working.
Which old man is very clever and capable of amazing technological feats?
Like that nickname?
My good friend, John Blickman. John Blickman, he is one clever dude, and he uses that clever brain of his to make some amazing brewing equipment. So if you're in the market for anything from a basic, just no frills, but, solid quality, brew kit, the Anvil series, he's got you there. If you got, you like to do, I know you like some technology in your brewing, and you like some high-end stuff with lots of the things that make your brew day easier. And he's got that too in his Blickman series. And then he's even got commercial grade brewing equipment. If you want to start a small commercial brewery, he's got that. I think, 10 barrel systems, up to 10 barrel systems he's got. And, guy is a clever dude, makes some great stuff. And he has been a friend of the show for a long time, pretty much since the beginning. Over 15 years, he's been paying for the show, so you don't have to. So if you don't mind, send him a nice email, feedback@blickmanengineering.com. Tell him how much you appreciate that he pays for the show, so you don't have to. And John does appreciate it, so please do. Today, we're going to do Q&A. If you send in questions to brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com, that's where all these questions are coming from today, unless you're listening live. And then you can actually ask a question in the chat live on Facebook. And should I be able to find that, or maybe TC could find that?
I have to put it on the side.
Yeah, there you go. You can see if there's questions that come in.
We have 3 people watching, and I can't believe they haven't asked a question yet.
Right. Like, what the hell is this? I just stumbled upon this by random chance. All right. Well, let's jump right into it. I got a question from Chris B in Charlotte, North Carolina. He says, dudes, where's John? I'm not hating the shows without him. I'm just hoping he's all right. We'll be on again soon. Well, I guess he hadn't heard. Well, it really hasn't been on social media at all. They kept it pretty quiet, but John was in Nepal for wingsuit flying. He's quite the extreme sports enthusiast. He was wingsuit flying off a cliff in Nepal. I don't know exactly where, but I guess, towards the end, they opened the parachute for their landing. I guess either it was too late or there was a problem with the parachute, and man, right into the rocks. And, they have one death in every 500 jumps in wingsuit flying. So luckily, John is quite a stout individual. And so I think, he's got enough padding. So when he hit the rocks from, a few hundred feet in the air, he just kind of bounced, and he was okay, protected his organs. He's quite a beefy individual. So that's what happened. And that's why he hasn't been on the show for a while, because, he's in this hospital in Nepal, and, our anybody believe in this? No.
You could have warned me. I can't keep a straight face.
No, he's fine. He's been real busy with the MBAA stuff that he's doing, helping them with the materials and all that. And I don't know exactly what he does, but he's been doing that. So he's just just doesn't have the bandwidth available right now. I'm sure he'll be back on to do some shows with us in the future, but right now he can't do the regular thing. So that's all right. You still get me, and you get great folks like TC here. So
I get John sloppy seconds.
Maybe that's what they called him when he hit the ground. A lot of juice probably came out of him. A lot of beer probably came out of him. We call him Sloppy John. No?
Rock Candy. Best nickname ever. Let's stick to that one.
Rock Candy. Well, Rock Candy hit the rocks. So there you go. There's your answer, Chris. Thanks for your concern. But John is fine. Everything is normal. He's okay. I am just having a bit of fun. As we
double checking and make sure Chris didn't ask that in 2015.
Hey, he asked that in 2023. Was that this year? March 1st. Look at that. I'm on top of these things now.
Wow. It's impressive.
Speaking of which, got one from Bill in Buffalo, New York, back July 22nd, 2014. Hope Bill hasn't been waiting on the answer before he brewed, because that'd be a little while. But Bill was asking about starting mash temps. Bill says, "So what up, guys? I plan on stepping up into all grain brewing in the near future. I want to have a little more control over my mash temperature, so I decided that I will build a small rim system from some do-it-yourself projects I have found. I know typically when using a cooler as a mash tun, you heat up your water well above your main temperature or your mash temperature, then count on temperature drops from the cooler itself and the grains going in it to reach your desired mash temperature. My question has to do with using a rims. Do I still heat my water above the desired mash temperature and allow the grains to drop the temperature back down? Or should I start at my desired mash temp, add the grains, and then allow the rims to pick the temperature back up to the desired mash temperature? Or do I just relax and do whatever is comfortable, as the starting temperatures will not affect the mash one way or another? Thank you, Bill." What do you say?
I had a few thoughts. I figured I could throw them out there and you could tell me how stupid I was and say what's right. Within reason, I would target just a little bit low, because what he has more heating control than cooling control, right? I mean, technically with the rims, you could cool, but that's not likely how he's set up. So I target a couple degrees low and bring it up, but only a couple, I'm thinking. So you deviate too much and you're in a whole different zone of mashing, right?
Right. No,
my thoughts.
That's actually very insightful.
I'll hang it up and see you in the pub later.
Right. Because you're absolutely right. Generally you go with a higher temperature. Just do room temperature water, throw it in there, and bring it up with rims. But like Travis is saying, you go with a hotter temperature water than what your desired mash temperature is. The grains, the temperature of the grains and the temperature in your cooler or whatever will bring that temperature down. But it's better to err on the side of being a little bit too low than a little bit too high. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make that much of a difference. If you're a couple degrees off one way or another, it's not the end of the world. It'll be fine. But if you really want to hit your numbers and, to do good repetitive brewing, you want to be able to hit every number exactly the same every time, to be able to replicate beers and make adjustments. So, try and, Bill, once you brewed on that system in the past 9 years, you've been brewing the system.
Yeah.
You've probably noticed that it's kind of predictable what, how many degrees over you need to be in order to hit it. And since the amount of water as long as you vary the amount of water with the amount of grain, and that's consistent, and your temperature is consistent, where you store your grain is about the same temperature, because the temperature of the grain, let's say it's in the winter and you're brewing and it's sitting in the garage, could be quite cold. You add that to the water, that would draw it down, versus the height of summer where the grain is quite a bit warmer. You could have a 20-degree difference in the temperature of your grains that you're adding to this water, and that will pull down the temperature even more. So it's a little bit of a guessing game, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not the end of the world if you end up off by a bit. But like TC's saying, if you're a little bit low, it's easier to go up than to go down on a rim system.
Just think if we had him on to tell us how wrong or right we were over his last 8 years of 9 years of brewing. Yeah.
There you go. All right, let's do this. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more of your questions right after this.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Are you looking for a simple brewing system that's great for all grain brewing, but everything on the market seems to be full of compromises? Blickman Engineering has the answer. The Blickman Brew Easy All Grain Brewing System. The Brew Easy is a complete system with easy upgrades and a beautiful compact design, perfect for any size brewing location. At its core, the Brew Easy is built on two gorgeous Blickman Boilermaker brew kettles, a high-temperature March pump, and either a top-tier gas burner or the new Boil Coil electric heater. The Brew Easy adapter lid allows the pots to stack on top of each other, forming an efficient, strong, and compact brewing setup that comes in 5, 10, and 20-gallon batch sizes. Upgrade your Brew Easy system with full automated control by adding a Blickman Tower of Power temp controller, and make moving around easy with the Blickman Kettle Cart. The Brew Easy is modular. If you already own a Boilermaker kettle, you can build your Brew Easy by purchasing just the modules you need. The new Brew Easy all-grain brewing system. See it today at BlickmanEngineering.com and brew with Blickman quality on your new Brew Easy.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. I'm here with my good friend Travis Combel. We are answering your questions from, decades ago or recently. Just depends, how the question hits me. I'm like, well, that's an easy one to answer. Might as well knock that one out. That seems.
I appreciate that. You brought the softballs for me. I saw it and I appreciate it.
I'll always give you the softballs. Yes.
Smooth ones too.
All right. Let's see here. Chris asks, he's talking about, there's a website called The Straight Dope, and they have a thing called a post there that says, do microwave ovens kill bacteria? He says, some straight dope research I thought you guys and the listeners might be interested in. They swabbed some pizza at delivery at 4 hours old after 30 seconds, and after 30 seconds in the nuker, they hypothesized nuking for 2 minutes would be sufficient. I thought it would be good information for anyone that doesn't have an autoclave. Or is it wrong? And he gives a link to the straightdope.com site. You could search for that and do microwave ovens kill bacteria. And the fact is, microwave ovens can kill bacteria. Microwaves can kill bacteria, but it's really the heat that is going to do a thorough job, right? So if you have water and it's got bacteria in it, and you nuke it for 30 seconds and it's boiling, you may have killed the bacteria. If it's just gets warm, you haven't killed the bacteria. So I'm sure if you could put an individual bacteria cell and stream microwaves at it, you could kill it. But that doesn't seem very efficient. And what was interesting, I read the thing on the pizza. The interesting thing is they swab the pizza. And you read it too, right?
Yes.
They swab the pizza fresh from delivery, and there's bacteria on it. And
so that tells you one of two things.
Right.
Either even the pizza oven couldn't kill the bacteria, or they just don't handle it so well after they cook it. Right. It might tell you both. So, if your pizza oven's not just destroying your bacteria, I'm not sure if you can really trust a microwave to do it either.
Well, now, most pizza ovens, the traditional brick ovens with the stone in them, they run those about 550 degrees. So that should be able to kill the bacteria. It's in there until it gets where it melts the cheese, everything else. I mean, it depends on where the bacteria is. It could be nestled underneath some, pepperoni or something. Maybe it doesn't get as hot. I think generally it gets the pizzas get quite hot, and I think that could do it. They should be over boiling temperatures. So they're probably getting at least to 250, 300 by the time they're cooked. I would think that could do it, because that's a wet heat, which is more effective than a dry heat.
And they slap it in this box that's been sitting around with the flour and
box.
stuff.
All right, some guy was folding these boxes. Who knows? And then also, when you bring it out, it sits there on the counter for a moment or two. You got to let the pizza cool down before you cut it. I used to work in pizza. You got to let it cool down before you cut it. Otherwise, the cheese just melts off into the cuts, and you end up with a mess. So you let it cool out. But when you do, it's exposed to the air, bacteria, wild yeast, people talking, and the spit flying is all landing on the pizza. And then it's not hot enough to kill everything.
Right.
So, and then it goes in the box. And you never know. The driver, picked his nose and fingered your pizza. Who knows? Let me think back to all the things I did to pizza when I was delivering.
That's a separate show, Jamil.
I never did anything to any pizza. Although there was a time when I ate a slice of a pizza. So here's a tip to you: if you ever get a pizza and there's an odd number of slices there, driver ate a slice. So
you rearranged it to look like it was full. Stretch the cheese out.
Oh yeah. You just kind of, this pizza was cut into a lot of really thin slices. Oh, so it was hardly anything. I was starving. Anyways. So there's bacteria on that pizza you just got delivered, but there's a lot of bacteria, and most of it that we end up consuming is fairly harmless, so our bodies are able to fight it off. And they say like 2 minutes probably would have been sufficient, but but at 2 minutes, you can't eat the pizza. It's, just totally crispy to petrified. So it works for some things, but it's definitely not an autoclave. So autoclave uses pressure and temperature, and through the pressure and temperature achieves a sterile environment. So the home autoclaves that we use them wet, and at 15 psi, that's about 250 degrees Fahrenheit. You do 250 degrees Fahrenheit wet for 23 minutes, I think it is. And that is sterile. So, microwave for 2 minutes isn't going to cut it. And I suppose it's better than nothing, but I would not count on it.
I use a microwave to clean, kind of, not quite. Well, you can call it sanitize some of my lesser containers that I do things with that it's not as critical.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're stained and should probably be trash anyway, but I'll put them in the microwave on a little simmer thing.
With a
let
little
them
bit
simmer
of water
for
or
about 3
something.
minutes. Yeah, right. But I don't use that for yeast that I want to repitch. I use that for, like a forced fermentation, where if it's not perfect, I'm not drinking it for sure anyway, right?
Right.
You don't want to drink your forced fermentations. But yeah, it's something, but it's not like the pressure cooker method. Not that I've played it out and checked for bacteria, personally, but I bet you have at least once.
Mm-hmm. You'd be shocked at how durable yeast and bacteria are. I mean, they didn't get this far with being delicate.
Right.
Mainly they survive by numbers, but even then, you'd be surprised. I was saying, I think I told this story already. I brought some yeast back from England, and I needed some work to get it going. And I asked Andrew at Heretic, I was like, hey, they were doing a small batch on their pilot system. And I said, hey, fill me up a couple of mason jars with, once you've been boiling for about 15 minutes, I said, fill me up a couple of mason jars so I can use it for this. And instead of waiting for to be boiling for 15 minutes, he goes, well, it got quite, hot. It got up to like 190. And then he filled it from that I have one jar that I used, and then the other jar I kept sealed. I didn't open it, anything. And it fermented in the jar, like a big layer of yeast on the bottom. So who knows what it was.
That defeats every bit of internet lore anybody has ever mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Just get it over 160 is fine. And here you had 190 that fermented in the jar.
Right. He was thinking, it's probably the mason jar was the lid. Well, the moment he handed it to me hot, I turned it upside down, to heat the lid. So I thought it'd be okay, but no, there's just too much stuff crawling around on grain. It could have been botulism. Who knows? Who knows? But who knows? All right. So yeah, microwave, maybe not. Okay. Ben asks, hey, Ben, I'm going to be spending a week in the UK in December. And he sent it in November. I mean, can't really help you, if you're not that quick. Of course, it was November 2015. So apologize for being a little late on the response here, Ben. But maybe this helps out other people. I'm going to be spending a week in the UK in December. I wonder if you had a list of must-visit pubs and or breweries. Thanks, Ben in Seattle. What would you suggest?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Uma Feathers should be on his list.
Mm-hmm.
Harvey's Tide House. Yep.
They're near Greenwich.
Yep.
Uma Feathers. They have usually what I tell people is, I'm not a travel agent. You can Google this. And that's generally what I tell people is, I mean, the way I find pubs anywhere I go is I Google it and see what comes up, pubs or breweries. And then I look at the ratings and see which ones, do well. And as far as pubs, there are a couple of great lists of historic pubs, and what I have Googled in the past is historic pubs in London. And it gives you a list of all the historic pubs, how old they are from the oldest, and it gives you little descriptions of them. It gives you walking tours. And I would just use one of those. If you haven't been before, there's so many great pubs there that,
Absolutely.
it's hard to say one way or another. I would make sure to hit a Harvey's Pub and get yourself some Sussex Best Bitter. I think is one of the greatest beers in the world, and you should definitely have some if you're over there and interested in British beer. So,
Yeah, really. If you know what you want to see in London, find out how close it is to where you're going to be. And if you just want to see good stuff, just start walking. It's a great town.
Yeah.
So many good pubs. I mean, have we ever walked into a bad pub in London? Paris is a different discussion.
Well, I will say there is a Young's pub, the Cheshire Cheese.
Interesting name.
The Cheshire Cheese. What is it?
Did you go there with Neil?
Yeah, ye old Cheshire Cheese. I think it is. It's an amazing building. But when I was in there, I've been in a couple of times, and the beer coming out of the cask on the hand pump, sour, chunks of stuff coming out, buttery. It was terrible.
They don't call them cheese for nothing.
And they did not care at all. The people serving it did not care.
Wow, that's the most surprising part.
Yep.
Wow.
Everywhere else you go, they tend to at least care a little bit. These folks didn't hardly care at all. And I was shocked. And I've been there a couple of times, like I said, and my opinion hasn't changed. It's mainly a tourist place, I think. And I'm just kind of shocked that they do that. And then where else was I? I went to a place, it was out. God, boy, I'm trying to think of what brewery it was, but there were so many fruit flies just swarming all over every faucet. Just I got a beer poured, sat at the bar, and just a crowd of fruit flies on my glass. I was like, oh my God.
Trying to remember if you told me that story, if I was with you.
I was by myself at this one.
Okay.
It was I could look it up where I was, and I could figure out which one it was, but it was disgusting. So you'll find those from time to time, but in general, I think, especially the knowledgeable British beer drinker is not shy about telling the publican that, something is bad. They'll be like, hey, this is crap. What are you doing pouring this? Polite people, but they will, point out when something as precious as their ale is off. They will point it out.
Patrick in the chat has a question for us.
Yeah.
Do you find old ales much in the UK?
Old ales, the style of beer?
Yeah, I believe that's what he means. He did not put an E at the end. He didn't say old ales, but I imagine in Patrick can coming back in because he's listening live. I assume.
Yeah. Not that often, but you do. I think some of the traditional breweries are still making them. They range, considerably in character. If you look at something like Theakston's Old Peculiar, that would be considered an old ale. There was Green King used to make their old stock ale or whatever it was, which was a blend of kind of like a pale ale and like a soured ale or something, or a stock ale and a soured ale or barrel aged ale.
But on average, it seems that the pubs usually did not necessarily carry an old ale. I think we went to a Theakston's Tide House that had that Old Peculiar. It seems not as common as just okay, they've got 4 different bitters from 4 different breweries, or
Right, right. The thing that keeps most places from serving them is that the alcohol level is much higher. And so it ends up being far more expensive than a bitter or a mild. So that kind of puts a damper on sales for it. And then in the past, the consumer wasn't that keen on high ABV beers there in England. But, with the kind of modernization of craft there, with all the craft brewers doing a lot of American styles and Belgian styles, the ABV of the beers for offer have gone up. And so I think you do tend to find maybe more and more people drinking higher ABV beers. In the past, it was difficult to find anything, beyond 5.5%. Nobody served anything past 6 or higher, I think, back in the day. Now you see it fairly frequently. So, and then my friend, our friend Henry Kirk, former head brewer at Dark Star, former brewer at Fuller's, since Asahi closed Dark Star. I went out there with our mutual buddy Neil Spake, and we helped brew the Gales Prize Old Ale this last brew here at Dark Star. And that is an old ale that's over 9%, and that I would say is much more classic old ale with kind of some of the funk and a lot of great character from the sugars and stuff like that. So you'll see that, and that got all bought up in a heartbeat. So you won't see that out there, but you'll see some.
It has to be bittersweet that you got to brew at Dark Star, and that was the last time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's you're talking about the other one that was an old ale, stock ale, the blend. That Gales Prize Old Ale is Solera style.
Yes.
A little bit of a blend. Yeah.
Yes.
That's very cool.
Right. So the organisms that were there when King George was around 100 years ago, when they started brewing it, was carried forward in the barrels, because they would age it in these wooden barrels for like a year or whatever, and then they take it out and package it. And so the microorganisms were living in that wood. And then when Gales got purchased by Fuller's, John Keeling, he realized the preciousness of that, and how all that wood stuff was going away, and all the Gales stuff was going away. So he actually went to Gales before it all got closed down, brewed a batch on the Gales on the Gales thing, or they brewed it and trucked it. I don't know. Anyways, he got it into the wood, and then that's been carried forward ever since then. They've kept back about half the beer from a batch in stainless. And then the organisms are still alive in there. And then when they brew a new batch, they blend it with that and keep the thing going, like Solera, like you were saying. And so those organisms are still alive in there, still kicking. So in this bottle, you have organisms that were, have a ancestry back to King George. It's kind of cool.
Hadn't killed anyone yet. I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah. Oh, it's all safe.
So what do you suppose they did with the half held back after they killed off Darks?
It got trucked back over to Fuller's. It's back at Fuller's.
Did Asahi buy Fuller's and the whole thing?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so the beer still exists. They just said buy Dark Star. We're going to hang on to this over there, and Who knows what the future of any of that is.
Well, they also own Meantime, so they said they were going to brew it next at Meantime, because Henry made it quite the commercial success. Mm-hmm. Because he has so many friends, because he's such a wonderful person, that everybody's supportive of Henry. And
that's a good sign. I was afraid it was just dead. That's great. Right. I mean, I'd love for that to move forward.
Yeah, they, like I said, it's impossible to get a bottle. Everybody snapped them up, the moment they came out. It turned out delicious. And they actually had it on cask at, what's the name of the little place? I keep going with the Princess Dance Around the Cherry Tree bar. It became a Fuller's place, and they had it on, and I went in, and over 9%. I'm like, I'm like, would you do a half pint? And he was like, oh, you don't want a full pint, 9%? And I almost went ahead and just did the full pint of 9% to show what kind of an American I am. But yeah, it was fantastic. So I haven't had any out of the bottles yet.
Oh, so you're hanging on your bottles too?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I will be cracking one open here fairly soon. We'll see.
I've got the one. That's how much love I have. I just got the one.
Yes.
So
hey, you got one.
I don't know when I'm going to open it because it is very exclusive. But
yes, I did send a couple to Neil, but
well, he was there.
Exactly. I knew you would understand. He was there. So he put the effort into going there. He deserved to have more than one.
Absolutely.
So
and I would share mine with him if he showed up. Neil, if he showed up, Neil.
Yeah, I don't think he's opened any because he's like, well, I don't want to waste it. I don't want to, unless there's, 5 people to share it with. I'm like, nah, I'm just going to drink a whole 500 ml bottle myself.
I'm probably going to have to call you one night and crack mine open, Anyway.
There you go. There you go. All right. Let me tell you about our good friends at Brew Chatter. They're out in Sparks, Nevada, right next to Reno. Brewchatter.com is the name of the website. And it is a fantastic homebrew shop where all the ingredients are fresh. Everybody you're going to talk to is very knowledgeable, and customer service is, job number one. Wonderful folks. My good friends, Josh and RJ. I love those guys. They really have helped take the homebrew scene in the Reno metro area up, I think, with their quality and knowledge. And they're good sponsors here for us as well. So if you get a chance, check out brewchatter.com. They can ship stuff to you. You can call them up for advice. You can email them, whatever. Good people. And if you happen to be in Reno, go out to Sparks, go by Brew Chatter. Go by Brew Chatter, then you're close to Lead Dog, and Revision is right there. And there's a couple other great breweries right in the area. Bunch of great breweries in Reno. Check them out. And they have a little bar in their homebrew shop there, where they usually have like 5 local beers on that are great, that they've personally vouched for. So you go in, you can have some great beers and enjoy yourself while you shop around and learn about various things about brewing at Brew Chatter. So check them out, brewchatter.com. Let's take another short break. When we come back, I'll have more of your questions right after this.
Back to the 2 guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. Let's see. Jason from Lincoln, California. He says, start me up. He says, hey, fellas, I hope all is well. I won't verbally blow you like most of your listeners do, as you're already well aware of the impact you have made on the homebrewing community. So here's my question. I make starters for all of my brews. I have read many times that a starter is done within 24 to 36 hours and sometimes sooner. There are many times I'm looking at a starter that has been on a stir plate for that amount of time or longer, 48 to 96 hours, and I can still see a lot of CO2 being produced. From my perspective, this is a sign that the yeast are still doing their thing, eating, multiplying, etc. Should one not wait until they see this type of activity dissipate to ensure maximum cell growth, no matter how long it's been? Maybe it's just residual gas at some point. I can tell you about residual gas. Maybe the agitation from the stir plate is making bubbles that just appear to be CO2. Some particulars. I use Mr. Malty to calculate my pitch rate. Starters are generally 2 vials into 2 to 6 liters of wort, depending on OG and style. Starter is almost always made with DME. Use a stir plate. OG is approximately 1040. Due to starter size, I prefer to crash decant starter wort. I heard this can help glycogen reserves too. Starter is generally done at room temperature. Nutrient always used. Cover loosely with aluminum foil to try and allow some oxygen exchange. Growing 10-gallon batches, all grain. Maybe I'm going to run into this answer as I'm currently reading Kristen Jamil's yeast book. Thanks for your time. Below's a pick of my home brewer. Built it last spring, having a lot of fun with it. Jason, yes. So you may see some activity. He was saying, from my perspective, since you see CO2 being produced, from my perspective, this is a sign that the yeast are still doing their thing, eating, multiplying, etc. Okay. They are eating, they're not multiplying at that point. The multiplying comes earlier on as they kind of adjust their environment and they start taking up and they start budding off daughter cells based on the existing situation, right? There comes a point where they stop multiplying and then all they're doing is just eating, right? It's at that point that you can, certain point into eating that, and they're done multiplying, you crash cool. What the yeast producers do, they crash cool them at that point to maximize the glycogen reserves in the yeast. If you let them go all the way to the end and till everything's completely done and stops and is sitting there and it's sitting warm, they are going to start using their glycogen reserves back up, and you will have less glycogen reserves in the yeast. It's not that big a deal. If you're pitching it into a beer, really wouldn't worry about it that much. But it is one of the things that, the yeast producers do really well to maximize the storage ability and the viability of the yeast when you go to pitch them. Because again, the yeast producers, they're not going from a starter the next day into a beer. They're going from starter into, packaging, into, sitting in their stock, getting shipped to the homebrew shop, getting purchased by you, all that stuff. So they need the glycogen reserves. It's not as critical for a homebrewer. So yeah, in 48 hours, it's done multiplying. Everything's done. It's probably pretty much done with fermenting too, unless you pitched a very small amount of viable yeast and you had a very large starter. Generally, it should be done by then for sure. It's taking 96 hours. I mean, you can ferment a full beer in 96 hours. So, generally, I'd give it, 2 days and you're done. Stop the stir plate. Put it in the fridge, let the yeast settle out, and then when it's time, decant off the liquid, and then you've got your yeast that you're going to pitch. One of the things that Travis does and I do is make the yeast ahead of time, and then the morning of your brew day, put some sterile wort in there and let the yeast get active, and then when it's time to pitch into your beer, it's already a little frothy and it's gotten a little bit of a head start. Gets cranking.
I think you created and answered a question, what you were just saying, Jamil. And I don't know, it's been a while since I read the yeast book. I'm not sure if that's even addressed in the yeast book, but the Mr. Multi-Calculator, and I don't know that any other addresses it as well, but you specifically state, as we play with the slider, growth. Are you looking at 2x growth, 3x growth, 4x growth as we go, ratio of yeast to starter? And so it makes me wonder if we target the lower ratios, would we make more, especially if we did it a week in advance, more potentially, because the higher the yeast ratio to wort, the yeast is just going to run out. It can't run to the end because the end is already, the end is near, it's already over. So if you would approach a lower ratio, because you're a few days in advance, might you have a better yeast viability when it was time to pitch? Versus if you said, I'm going to take this one pouch and I'm going to multiply it X times, make the biggest starter I can out of this one pouch because that's all the homebrew shop had, or I'm cheap because I'm cheap. So you forced the growth and you run it all the way to the end, and you kind of tired out your starter before you even pitched it. Not considering like a little bit of a repitch of a wort with some oxygen, some nutrient, pick it back up. So does that make an argument for making a lower ratio growth over a higher ratio growth? or am I just way looking too far into it?
Yeah. So the yeast will only do, maybe a 4x or a 5x. If there's not enough wort there, then, or you're going real low gravity, you got a delicate yeast that you need to baby along. It's been carried around in a backpack during the heat in England for a week or more, then you kind of need to baby it along. Then you're not getting as much, growth at that point. The thing is, if you make a much larger starter, you can look at, a 5-gallon batch of beer. If you're throwing a little bit of yeast in there, what happens? The yeast will multiply a bit, but they reach their limit of multiplying. And then they, just go into fermentation mode, and then they will try and ferment out all the rest that is there and may not. So there's still a limit. You can make a larger starter, you can make a higher gravity starter, but most of the time it won't do any good. You're just getting the multiplication that you get. So, on a stir plate, you're going to get, 4 times the amount of yeast, 4 or 5 times the amount of yeast, something like that. So just depends. Let's see here. Tim writes, I'm a long-time listener of the Brewing Network. I'm a home brewer and recently started working as an assistant brewer at a professional brewery in Massachusetts. We are looking to get in touch with a BJCP judge that can give us some constructive feedback. We would appreciate any contacts you may have. P.S. I basically owe my employment to the BN. Thank you for all your entertainment, vast amounts of info. What would you do, Travis, if you were looking for feedback on a beer?
Well, all right. So, all right, you're in for there. Sorry. If I was looking for feedback the way he was looking for feedback, I'd look for a homebrew group. Because hopefully we'd have some judges in there, or at least some people with opinions on beer. Outside of that, as a pro, you stumped me, because everybody wants to give their opinion when they don't think anyone's listening. And the second you're listening, people maybe don't want to give you their opinion so much.
So what's the solution to that?
I'd pay the heck out of my bartender to lube everybody up and get their opinions.
Or send your beers into competition.
Yeah. But pros can't do that. I mean, as BJCP, they can do it for JBF and CBC.
Oh, yeah. Well, there are commercial competitions, and they tend to be at the state level.
You guys have the state fair, right?
Yeah, most states will have commercial beer competition at their state fair, or there tends to be, the guild will put some on and things like that. And the great thing about, competition entries is they are, judge blind. So nobody knows that it's your beer. You don't have to worry that,
Absolutely.
And that way you get complete blind, feedback on it. And so I think that's the best way. That's because if you get a person to come in and, taste your beer and tell you about it, it's one person, and they may have biases. They may be afraid to, speak their mind. I'm always a little hesitant to say what I think about somebody's beer, because honestly, it doesn't matter, how good a brewer somebody is. There are always little things that could be better in most beers. Now, there are beers that are absolutely flawless, and they're absolutely fantastic, and we should appreciate them being such. But a lot of times there's a little tweak. It'd be like, yeah, it'd be nice if, it was this way or that way. You know what I mean? So
I like the state level. It's I think Texas only initiated it about 2 years ago, shamefully. And Tim asked this back in 2015, and he's was that Massachusetts? MA?
Massachusetts, yeah.
Yeah, you've got the wonderful experience of having lived in California, specifically for the beer environment and the state fair competitions and so forth. And yeah, I like that regional competition a whole lot more than national.
Yeah,
I think that's a great idea. Absolutely.
Yeah, That's what I would do. I would try going with that. All right. One last quick break, and then we'll wrap up with your questions right after this.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back. Don't forget, if you're listening live, you can always ask questions in the chat, or you can mail them in, brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com. Those questions, I'm catching up. I swear I'm catching up. Plus, the new ones that come in, I'm tending to pick those off quicker, and then I'll throw in some of the old ones too, to work on the backlog. But questions used to come in like, hundreds a month, and it was impossible to keep up with them. So we got quite far behind. But I vowed at some point, I remember this, that I would answer all the questions. So that's what I'm going to do. At some point, I think here's what's going to happen. You're going to see me all by myself drinking, and it's going to be like a 10-hour episode of me drinking and quickly rattling off answers.
I'll be there with you. I'll keep my mouth shut so it goes faster, but I'll be there with you.
It'll be fun. I don't know. I think we ought to do it. Although, what would be even better is if we did it on location.
Yes.
I'll just print out I'll get myself like 3 reams of paper. I'll print all the questions, put it in a suitcase or a backpack. I'll go to various places and just pull out sheets and start rattling off answers.
Get a dot matrix with some continuous sheets and just print it out.
The old dot matrix and continuous sheets. I guarantee people are still using those.
Oh no.
Dot matrix is a bulletproof
True.
printer.
It's true. It didn't mess up near as much as inkjet did.
Oh yeah, inkjet's terrible. They dry up if you're not using them constantly. I love me an old dot matrix. Just the sound of them. Oh, of course, before that, it was like tap, 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 tap. Then it.
Oh, the wheel. The daisy wheel.
Oh, the daisy wheel. Oh, yeah. That was one of the first printers I had because I needed, I needed something more typed for my my classes.
So you changed the wheel out to change the font? What?
Yes, you did. Right. If you need, it's smaller font, you'd go. Italics, you'd swap the wheel.
So of the 4 people tuned in, how many of you think have ever experienced that?
I don't know. It depends how old they are. Let's see here. Okay. Let's get serious here. Come on. This is a December of 2022 question. I'll have you know, it's just a little over a year old. That's fresh. Fresh in my book. Brett is asking about the ideal gas law, Henry's law, Dalton's law. We should have done this when we were more sober, I think.
Or younger, or still in college. Take your pick.
Hi, Jamel, John, and other hosts as appropriate. Travis.
As appropriate. Thank you.
And Mr. As appropriate. If I understood correctly, some beer could use as much as 20 milligrams of oxygen per liter when pitching yeasts. I wonder how this is achieved, given the limited dissolved oxygen saturation concentration of water and water-like liquids. Since I pressure ferment, I pressurize, and temperature plays a big role in that too. Since I pressure ferment, I pressurize the fermenter with about 8 psi of pure oxygen rather than bubble pure oxygen through the wort. When equilibrium is reached, the wort should have about 17 milligrams per liter of DO. Is there something wrong with this technique? Y'all need to proofread your questions here. Otherwise, or I should proofread them, write in the missing letters before I read them. Is there something wrong with this technique? I'm curious to learn how you added oxygen at Heretic and what DO concentrations could you achieve sustained. I add about 210 milligrams of oxygen to a 5-gallon batch, depending on starting DO. Regards, Brett. P.S. You and the Brewing Network have helped me make better beer and more knowledgeable. Thank you. I hope you're still doing the show 5 to 7 years from now so you can get to my question.
Fair question. Fair statement, I mean.
See?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Have you ever capped a fermenter and put 8 psi of oxygen on it?
I have not.
Okay, because that's sort of the premise of this question, right?
Have you?
I do not do that.
I can tell you that is one way to do it. So at Heretic, we were dealing with fermenters that were 21 and a half feet tall. And so you have some, pile of wort there that you have some hydrostatic pressure that's going to help also dissolve some oxygen in there. But using a very fine sintered stone in line as the wort is transferring from the whirlpool or the heat exchanger through to the fermenter, the 20 parts per million, White Labs had actually gone around and measured at various breweries the amount of dissolved oxygen that they were getting in their fermenters. And there was breweries getting, 20 plus. There was brewers getting, like 4 or 6.
Wow.
Just depended on the technique and what was going on. So it is possible. And I think this is going back to, we did a show and talked about at Heretic, we settled on Imperial's juice yeast for the hazies. And Imperial recommends high 20 parts per million to help it ferment, which is interesting to me because, you can end up with, kind of a hot alcohol character, I think, if you use too much oxygen. But so the reason why you'd need that is because I'm assuming these yeasts came from a kind of a British yeast strain, and a lot of those were used. That's why they started doing the double drop and things like that to aerate the beer partway through to get it to attenuate out fully. And I think you're seeing the same thing. So I think you can put it all in at the beginning, or you could, fluff the beer afterwards and get, more oxygen in later. It's mainly if you're trying to do a bigger beer with a yeast like that, you need to ensure it has enough oxygen or it won't fully attenuate out, was the issue. If you're doing something like, your general pale ale strength stuff, probably not as much of an issue. So his method, I think is fine. I think part of what happens when you put oxygen in a fermenter, let's say when I was homebrewing, I'd use a glass carboy. I'd take a wand with a sintered stone on it down to the bottom of the fermenter, and I'd run it for, depending on what I was doing, generally, let's say a minute at, a liter a minute or a half a liter a minute, whatever it was, or 2 minutes at a half liter. And, you kind of stir the wand around the bottom so you get an even dispersal from the bottom up. But part of what happens is, I think you saturate the wort, and oxygen comes out and fills the headspace. And then when you cap it, that oxygen stays in there, and it does get absorbed by the wort and taken up by the yeast. So that's in there as well. So it's going to depend on how much headspace you have. So when Brett pressurizes his fermenter with 8 psi of pure oxygen, it depends on how much headspace. So if he has, 10 gallons of headspace for his 5 gallons of wort, and that's filled with pure oxygen at 8 psi, that's a considerable amount of oxygen to add to the beer versus if he's got a half gallon of headspace, right? So I think he would need to take that into account. And it's very difficult to know for sure how much DO you have without a meter to read it. What's important for homebrewers, unless they want to pony up and get a meter, actually the parts per million meters are not that expensive these days. Look at me, Mr. Moneybags. They run under $200. And, some of you guys out there, I know you're spending way more than that. You don't need a parts per billion meter, you need a parts per million, and that's not terribly expensive. And that's really the only way you're going to know your dissolved oxygen in your wort. But what's more important for a home brewer is to be consistent in the dosing of oxygen. So you want to set yourself up with a centered stone, use the same stone every time, use, a regulator that will deliver a consistent flow, half liter, 1 liter, whatever per minute. And then also tie that into the amount of wort that you have. So if you're dealing with 4 gallons of wort, you would add less oxygen. If you're doing 5 gallons of wort, you do more. If you're doing 10 gallons versus 5, you would double it. So you have some consistency across flow, time, volume. And if you do that and you take notes, if the beer turns out well, then you keep doing what you're doing. If the beer needs more oxygen, more adjustment, then you do that as needed. Try more oxygen. If the beer improves, okay, more oxygen was good. If the beer gets worse, maybe it's less oxygen. So that would be how you do it. All right.
You created two. Sorry, do you have to take a break?
No.
You created 2 questions with that. Question 1 was tying it back to the pro level. All us lowly homebrewers always think about the pro level, right? And your recommendation is 1080 plus double oxygenate for regular, like 001 Chico. And
maybe two separate doses, right?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Spread 8 to 20 hours apart.
Were you able to do that on the pro level?
Yes.
Okay, because that was question 1. Because I know you oxygenate in stream on your first oxygenation. You go like to a stone on the side of the vessel for your second one?
No, we leave the equipment hooked up. So we wouldn't be disconnecting things and reconnecting things for sanitary reasons. So everything got hooked up from the very beginning. We'd run, we'd heat it all up to sanitize everything. And then we'd do the oxygen on the first run, and then it stayed connected. We'd oxygenate again after about 8 hours. And then after that, we could disconnect it and take it off.
Second question I had, it's probably a whole discussion. We have, you oxygenate your beer, you inoculate it with your yeast, and sometimes it kicks off fast, sometimes it kicks off 12 hours. And sometimes people are really excited because it kicked off fast. I'm like, well, maybe you had so little oxygen, so little yeast, it finishes growth cycle in 2 hours, and bam, it kicks off.
Right.
So that's I don't think
not necessarily a good thing. Now, we were talking earlier in the show about, kind of getting your yeast active by adding some sterile wort, in the morning, and by the time you get your wort ready, it's starting to foam. That can help, with things. But yeah, if you put in a ton of oxygen, and the yeast will keep taking it up instead of getting into fermentation mode. So that can delay things. So, sometimes people focus too much on trying to accelerate one thing. It's like, well, if a little bit's good, more is better. Sometimes just doing the standard traditional way of brewing is absolutely the best.
Excellent. Yeah. So, that answered the question in a nutshell. When you're looking at that, especially when you're thinking, like, honestly, I don't know how much I'd have to over-oxygenate or under-oxygenate to taste a difference, but I can usually see a difference in the fermentation character. Mm-hmm. It won't ferment as fast, or it will ferment faster, not just in kickoff, but finishing.
Right.
Based on my yeast health and how much I oxygenated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I hope I never push it to the extremes where I can taste the effect, not just see the, plus or minus half a day here and there.
All right. Well, there you go. All right. Lots of good questions. Thank you, everybody who emailed your questions in to BrewStrong at thebrewingnetwork.com. Thanks, Patrick, for asking a question in the chat. If you're listening live, you can stay tuned. We're going to take a quick pee break and restock our beers, and then we'll have a whole nother episode for you coming up here right after this. And then make sure that you check out all our fine sponsors, especially our good friends at Blickman Engineering. Check them out, blickmanengineering.com. They've been paying for this show for 15, 16 years, so you don't have to. So the least you can do is check out their website, maybe send a nice email to John Blickman, feedback at blickmanengineering.com, and tell them how much you appreciate it. And our friends Josh and RJ at Brew Chatter, check them out. I go up to Reno as often as I can, and when I do, I go and hang out with those guys. It's a load of fun. Check them out, brewchatter.com. Till then, everybody, brew strong.
Brew strong.